Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the December 16th and final meeting of the COB for 2022. Welcome to our guest, Armando Saldate, and we've got a couple of board members who are not on video but are on the meeting. So I'll call the meeting to order based on our quorum. So a couple of things. I'll just go through some board business announcements, and then we'll get to discussing some open questions with Executive Director Saldate. And then we are going to have a quick chat with members of what's known as the Nominating Committee. COB has a little bit of an unusual approach to filling board positions, and we are in the process of potentially proposing some changes to that just to streamline the way that we fill positions and making that a little bit more expedient. So we'll have a good discussion there, and then we'll potentially adjourn into some executive session discussions on open investigations. So the first matter of board business, if board members have had the chance to review minutes for the December 2nd meeting, if I can have a motion to approve those minutes.
So move.
Great, and a second?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Great, the motion passes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was sorry. Hey, Julia, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
I'm having connection issues. What was the motion?
Approve the minutes.
Forgot. I just got on. Oh yeah. Okay. That's
Not
easy.
a very controversial motion.
Thank you. Sorry.
No, it's all good.
No, it isn't. Thank you.
Okay, so the next matter of board business is the strategic plan. So Daniel sent around a draft version of that strategic plan for the board to review. I know I personally have not had a chance to look at it, and so I'm aiming to do that at the end of the year. But I'd like to ask board members to provide their feedback / comments by our January 6th meeting, and I'd like to put that on our agenda for discussion and finalization at that meeting, if that works for folks. So if that is not going to work, let me know and we can find a different date, but just want to get that wrapped up. Okay, next item for board business is just a quick announcement, standing announcement, that we currently have 2 board seats open that members of the community can apply for, and we have a lot of big goals. Obviously, a new strategic plan, as I just mentioned, and we want to make sure that we're doing all of these things with full strength. So information is available to apply, and we'd love to have you. So the final thing is the board on our December 2nd meeting voted unanimously to make an offer to Liz Castle, to serve as the next independent monitor. And we are thrilled to note that she has accepted that offer. And so I'd like to take a board vote to move her nomination to City Council, which would be on their January 3rd meeting, to enable her to start on January 4th. The vote is a little bit ceremonial, and I'll just note for those who are tracking us closely that we have already made that motion to council. So I just want to make sure that you know, somebody's not questioning the dates here, but I want to make sure also that the community understands our vote of confidence and really making a public declaration about that confidence in Liz. So if I can have a motion to move Liz's nomination to a council vote.
Julia, just like a friendly amendment to that. I think maybe technically it's just sort of a ratification. It's probably more of a ratification of our prior decision. So ratifying our decision to make an offer to Ms. Castle. So moved.
Okay. Okay, a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. So the motion passes, and I know we are all thrilled, and Hope Council is all equally thrilled to place Liz in the role of independent monitor. We felt like we had really excellent candidates, and we were really pleased at the engagement from the community and our community partners in this process. We're thankful for all the feedback that we got from community members and community partners on the candidates. We considered that feedback very carefully, and in addition to, the stakeholders who were part of the interview process and the selection committee. So just wanted to say thank you for everyone in your participation, and we are very pleased with the outcome and eager to get Liz on board. Okay, so with that, I would like to transition us to discussion with Executive Director Saldate. I think the last time we met with you was in August, so it's been a while. We have a number of outstanding questions to you. I know Daniel provided those in advance of the meeting. Some of them are focused on, the actions and results of the LoDo shooting, and, some general questions about the process for officer-involved shootings, and are just hoping that you can spend a little time answering those questions today. Some of them are board questions, some of them are community questions. And so if you wouldn't mind, you're welcome to, have an opening set of comments, but we'd love to sort of work through those with you. There are also some comments about, some questions about PID policies, which is the Public Integrity Division, and IA Pro, that if we have time, we'd like to go through with you as well. So if that works for you, Executive Director, I'll turn it over to you. It's nice to see you.
Great to see you, and good morning, board. Good morning, community members that have joined us today. Thank you for the time. Yeah, it's been quite a bit. I know we had a reschedule there in the midst of all this, and it's been a very busy time. I first just want to take a quick moment to congratulate you and the board on the nomination of Elizabeth Castle. Chief Thomas, Sheriff Diggins, and I appreciate the opportunity that you made available to us to discuss and have a discussion with the top two candidates. They're both very good, and we look forward to hopefully Elizabeth's confirmation on the 3rd, and starting out the new year working with her. Also, special thanks to Greg Crittenden. I know it's been a long interim process, but through it all, he's really been a reliable partner, and really helped us get through some real tough times through the pandemic and different ways we were doing it. So my compliments to him and his continued partnership with us, and I'm glad we're not losing him. He'll just go back to his old role. So that'll be great. Yeah, diving into the questions. I'm sorry, Greg, did you say something?
Oh, I was just thanking you.
Oh, thank you. Okay, great.
It.
So yeah, diving into the questions. So the LoDo shooting, there are, I'm going to read the questions just for everyone's edification, and then I'll provide some comments. So the board has asked, is this a situation where including audio and body cam buffer recordings would have helped the investigation and review? As the board knows, oh, and you know what, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge a new member of the board. Anna, it's good to see you again. Congratulations on being nominated to the board and being accepted to the board. We look forward to working with you as well. As I have in the past with new members, I'll work with Daniel to schedule time that we can just kind of talk. And if you have any questions, we'll definitely look forward to that. So sorry, I forgot all about that. So the board this has been a topic that has been in discussion, I can think of at least for probably about a year now. And this is the ability on body worn cameras that there's a buffering period. So prior to the button being activated, when the officer taps on that button to turn the camera on, there's a buffering period that goes back 30 seconds for video. Actually, I may have got that wrong. So I think we go back, I believe it's 30 seconds for video. It captures 30 seconds for video. And there is an ability, and it's video only, there is an ability to also include audio in that functionality, in that rollback period. And what that is really meant to do, it's a fail-safe, I think, by the manufacturer to to capture something if it just happened, and it would capture those events happen. In this particular situation, the buffering did give us an opportunity to see more from the perspective of the responding officers. There was also in this investigation available to it, Halo camera. Halo is the downtown cameras that if you're traversing downtown in other parts of our cities, if you look up, there are parts of our cities that have cameras that are monitored by police departments' real-time crime center. And that video footage is recorded. So this has been a topic that continually comes up, and I know that when I've addressed it in the past, I relied on DPD's technical, because I wasn't really sure on the technology, what were the reasons why we weren't enabling audio. I think I obviously would want the most evidence that we can for any situation, and including audio. I go back to my experience working in jails when I was working in internal affairs function. There were several times when we were just before body-worn cameras got into jails where all we had was video, and we had, I know as an investigator or someone monitoring what happened, that we'd always known that it would be very valuable to hear what was actually being said, the orders that were being given. So I know that back when we discussed this, and I discussed this with our previous chief, Chief Payson, there were some reasons as to why the police department did not activate that. I'm not sure I'll capture all of them, but I remember some of them, and one of the more significant ones was battery life. Particularly now, and so what happens is, my understanding is that the battery life is not as long if that audio buffering is enabled, the capturing of audio during them. I do know, I've seen it in real practice. When officers are working an extended shift, a long shift, if they've had a lot of activations of their camera, battery life is a significant issue to where the battery may die, and we may not have, latter parts of their shift covered by battery life, by battery functionality. I think, that should be an easy solution accomplished for, that we had solution, are there spare batteries? Are there other mechanisms? Are there times where they could get on a dock and charge that? But sometimes, an officer, especially in our shifts these days, they're running call to call to call, and there isn't that time period allowance. Now, that was one of the instances. I know that there was some other privacy interest and some other things that had come up. But I think that we are at a point where I think we should have a formalized study of this. And go ahead, Julia.
You can keep going. I'll go when you're done.
Yeah, and I think we're at a point where I will get with Chief Thomas and look and get his subject matter experts, and then I think we need to engage the vendor and engage them. I'm sure this isn't and see what they're seeing from other agencies and departments around the country that may be enabling audio buffering, and what is the impact of their battery life, and is it having a negative consequence to them. So I think we need to get that. I think we should make that clear to the community as part of our overall review, not only in this, but a lot of our instances of this where this may be helpful. I know that Chief Thomas, it's been great working with Chief Thomas since he's hit the ground running in his new role, and I know he is open to expanded transparency in that regard as well. So I will be and Elise Ron, our government affairs and community engagement manager, is on the call. She'll be jotting down the action items for me to do, and one of those action items is to work with them, with the police department, their technology unit, and the vendor, which is Axon, and try to see if this is possible, and if we could overcome some of those previous barriers to this, to try to enable something like that. You want to get your question now?
Yeah, sure. So
Okay.
we met with Chief Thomas in early December at our December 2nd meeting, and I do recognize that Chief Payson had some objections to it or some reasons for it not happening. But when we met with Chief Thomas, he said should be fine. In my notes, I have a note that says buffering dash should be good.
Okay.
so there are probably some data storage concerns, but that is a very incremental, 30 seconds of video is pretty incremental to the, typical duration of a video. The reason that we brought it up in the first place was because we learned that other jurisdictions don't follow the same practice that the DPD does with this, buffering differential. So, it does seem like it's a pretty standard practice to have the audio and video start at the same time. Not at the same time, but have this like longer buffering. I think the board agrees with your perspective that more evidence is always better. And particularly, in these officer involved shootings, we've seen incidents where the footage, starts a little bit late in the event and things like that. So even just having some audio, which can also confirm the behavior, the perceptions, the emotions of the officers involved. From our perspective, there's no downside to this, and whatever costs or battery life issues would be pretty incidental to the the value that could provide.
Yep, thank you. And I'm glad I accurately predicted. I talk to Chief Thomas every day, but we haven't talked specifically on this topic yet.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to create a gotcha. That's why I was like,
right.
you should probably not be said.
All good,
fine.
all good. No, I think me and him track pretty well on where we stand, and I know that and I bet you copied his quote verbatim, because he's a man of few words, so should be good. Was probably exactly what I get when I get to him. So that's good to hear. As for the other questions with the LoDo shooting, these are community questions, and they're very important questions, and they need to be answered. But I hope everyone can appreciate that we have a couple of legal processes and future legal processes that will be taking place and are taking place. The initial legal process that's happening with the criminal prosecution of the subject that produced the gun and was and then shot by police, Mr. Waddy. That process, that's criminal prosecution. If I could take you all back during that time frame, we explained that. We at the police department explained, on the timing of the release of the video, also meeting the obligations of the new state legislations, which mandated a release within 21 days with a couple of exceptions. And those exceptions are legal exceptions around folks from the courts objecting to the release. So in the initial release of the footage of the LoDo shooting, there was that process had played out. And that process was, we got the videos together. We then went to the district attorney and then the defense counsel, Mr. Waddy, to ask them if they had any objection to it being released. And we then released it after not getting an objection, we released it within the time frame. We also did as we do in most or almost, I think everyone I can think of, officer involved shootings or critical incidents. The commander of our major crimes gives a run of not only the video, but then some explanations of the facts that had been ascertained to that point. We scheduled that briefing for the press and public a few days after, at least try to do it within a week of the incident. What is taking place in there is that fact finding, that initial fact finding, interviews of subject officers, interviews of maybe the subject that was involved in the case. And so those are those things, and they want to get them done before they go out and produce any more external information about this event. The second matter that has taken place, that took place since then, was that District Attorney Beth McCann announced that she was formalizing a grand jury to investigate the actions of and to determine the actions of the officers if they were in compliance with the legal defense, all those things, or if they're in violation of any laws. That grand jury is underway. It has been meeting for months now. It is my understanding that that grand jury is still impaneled and that a decision has not been made. So I have to be very respectful of that process. Grand juries are confidential proceedings. I don't know what's going on in them. Anyone that goes to them are sworn to confidentiality and those involved in the panel. So it would be improper for me to answer these questions, but I don't want to say they're never going to be answered. They are going to be answered. They're going to be answered through legal process, through the criminal investigation. And then there are also a question in regards to civil judgments or civil payments to the victims in this, the bystanders, or any victims that may have been harmed by this event. And that, to my knowledge, I can't answer that. I do not know that there has been any sort of judgment, any sort of formal actions, judgments, lawsuits, any court hearings in regards to the civil side of this. It's been my experience that in most times the criminal proceeding takes place first, and then the civil proceeding. But I am not, and I would be aware if there was any significant, payments or anything like that, and I do not know of any. So that was one of the questions. The other community questions I want to cover, just so that the community knows what the questions are, was why was there a delay in getting treatment for Mr. Waddy? Mr. Waddy was the subject to allegedly produced a gun during this encounter, and after he was shot and had extensive injuries. And then the one I just talked about, has the Department of Safety and the Denver Police Department offered money in the form of legal settlements to any of the injured bystanders? That one, we haven't offered any money, and none of those matters from the civil side of that have gone forward that I know of. Not that they won't, but that I know of. And then the last one was there's very little information available about the bystanders' injuries. As we know, there were innocent bystanders that were shot during these events. Their likely causes and/or material that may have been surgically removed versus bullet fragment versus other debris. Is this information that the DPD has, but is choosing not to talk about? Is Denver Health or other providers not sharing information with DPD, or have the injured individuals specifically expressed that information about the injuries not to be shared? And ultimately, yes, that type of information is subject to the investigation, and I'm sure it's being shared with the grand jury and will ultimately be made public, or all those details. So I apologize, I can't, but I have to respect the process. But I do know that at some point this information will get out to the public. Chairwoman, is there anything else in that regard for that section of the LoDo shooting question? Yes, Karen.
So I wasn't sure that I heard any response with regard to the delay in treatment.
So that is something that I did respond to it in saying that I can't respond. That's subject to the grand jury investigation, and those facts and the timing of the response and the treatment and the type will be made available once that the legal proceedings take place.
Okay.
Anyone else? I can't see. Okay, I want me to go into the next topic.
Before we move on, I do have a
Okay.
question about the death in custody with the Sheriff's Department. I am completely blanking on the individual's name. It was a Denver Health investigation, and I can't remember if you all received the results of that. Thank you, Leroy Taylor. So just I've lost the thread on that a little bit. Can you just sort of remind the community where we are?
Yeah, so last I was briefed on the Leroy Taylor death situation was that Denver Health, the criminal investigation was underway, was happening, and to give everyone on the same page of this, Mr. Taylor was in the custody at the downtown detention center. He was not feeling well. Our deputies took him to the medical infirmary for treatment, and he later passed while in custody. The results, the autopsy, the investigative results, I have not seen the final reports or anything in that regard. And I do believe there is pending civil litigation from the victim's family in regards to this. From the sheriff's side of this, and from the review from our side of it, the actions and the our deputies, other than urgent medical response, CPR, delivery of Narcan, those types of things, there are medical professionals in the facilities that we contract with Denver Health and Denver Health Correctional Care, and they were the responding and attending folks to what Mr. Taylor was suffering. So I do not know, and I have not seen personally a final report.
And then did you actually see the report from Denver Health eventually?
I have not. I have not. Okay, I'll go to the next topic as you discussed, which is our
Karen, did
public.
you have your hand up? Just a second.
Oh, sorry.
So are you aware that the report has been produced? Is there a final report in writing that exists?
But I don't know of when if one has been produced, I have not seen it. I am not aware of one.
Is it your expectation that there would be a report by now?
I don't, I would hope that we can get one. I know it's been quite some time. I know that these can be lengthy, their investigations, and especially in the medical determinations and things of that nature. But yeah, I would expect one, in the near future. If there was, it hasn't been one. I'm sorry.
Have you made inquiry as to where the progress is now on the report?
Yeah, my understanding is, so I get briefed on this through my interactions with Sheriff Diggins and the city attorney's office. We have meetings in regards to these cases where like civil litigation section of the city attorney's office will brief us on this. In the last briefing I had about a month ago, there was not any update, a new update for me.
And was there any explanation given as to what the delay was?
I don't recall any specific reason for that, other than I just know that these can take some time.
Well,
So-
would you be willing to follow up, Armando, and
Oh,
find
yeah,
out what
definitely.
the status is?
Yeah, definitely.
In your experience, does this seem like an inordinate time being taken to produce this final report?
Yeah, I don't know the exact time frame that's been taken. In my experience, I've seen all sides of this. I've seen things that have done relatively quickly, and I've seen things that have taken longer time. But this does seem to be a longer time that I've not heard of an outcome or at the final investigation or final report.
Okay, thanks. Any other board member questions? All right, let's keep going.
Okay, public integrity division policies. The board sent over this context. I just want to make sure I read it in its entirety. Thank you for your leadership in getting the public integrity division policies approved and implemented. We also appreciate your willingness to review these policies in the future for ways they might be improved upon. One of the big things the board's focused on was clarity of process, but there is one area where the process remains unclear. It's our understanding that the administrative investigative unit, which is the public integrity division's, it's another way to say internal affairs function, has the discretion to send misconduct complaints back to DSD for investigation, including PREA cases. And PREA stands for Prison Rape Elimination Act. It's a national initiative that was, I believe it was under Bush 43, that was a law that created protections and protocol to investigate sexual assaults within correctional institutions. And the DSD is a PREA department, a compliance department. So the first question is, under what circumstances would the Denver Sheriff Department be better equipped to investigate an allegation of deputy misconduct in AIU? So yeah, this has been a topic and a issue, and this really boils down to the triaging of an intake of cases. And as those that have been on the board for some time, those that were participating in the executive advisory board that was first started under Director Troy Riggs a couple of directors ago, in regards to this. And at that time, what really prompted one of the reasons that prompted the opening of and creation of the public integrity division was some of the problems that the department existed then, because of the managing and handling of complaints. In fact, I started in the city and county of Denver working for the Denver Sheriff Department in this function of, I first started in their internal affairs function, was one of the first investigators that they hired to come in from outside departments to try to get them back on track, their internal affairs function back on track, and try to get them. And then in fact, the height of the reform through the Hillard Hines and OIR report talked about some of those reforms that we initiated back then. And so then I was able to lead the unit there after that. The triaging of cases has always been a contentious issue. So for folks' knowledge, you know, in a jail environment where we're responsible for the feeding of inmates, their medical care, their access to you know, their faith services, to their mail, to all these things that happen, there obviously are things that can pop up, issues around what we call conditions of confinement. You know, my food, I didn't get my food, I didn't get my med pass, I didn't get my mail, I'm having delayed getting phone calls, or there's things. My family put money on my inmate account, but I don't see it. Like those types of things happen. Because of that, jails around the country, they have a process internally, which is called a grievance and internal like kite process. They call it kite or grievance process. So these are forms of written communication where inmates can formally allege these or talk about these complaints. This is also a mechanism for them to route complaints of misconduct. The deputy was rude to me. The deputy beat me up. You know, those types of things also come in through this. It has been, you know, the balance of handling, and there's a defined grievance process, grievance response process in the Sheriff's Department to address these things, where there's timelines, there's appeals, there's all those sorts of things around the conditions of complainant. There's also medical grievances. If they're complaining about the medical care, something I have no jurisdiction over, those get handled directly by Denver Health and their correctional care environment. That's their scope. The problem is where's that balance? So sometimes in these grievances, we will receive them and there may be an allegation of misconduct, or there may be something that is very illegible, that, you know, it's not really clear what the complaint is or what is being alleged. It's not really clear, and there just needs to be more kind of legwork done on trying to get to the core of the issue of the complaint. What is the true nature of the complaint? And that typically needs a staff member going to that inmate and communicating with that inmate to get kind of what is the issue here, what is happening here. So those sometimes make their way to the administrative investigative unit. We have worked for years trying to refine that, ultimately with the goal that the monitor has access to not only those complaints, but also the handling of those complaints, and also that the monitor would have access to the evidence that was looked on that made those, that was the foundation for the determination of those complaints. Evidence like, did they pull the video? Did they look at other things like records around the medical records to see if they did get their medication? Those types of records would then be looked, and then being able to make a determination about that complaint or not. So there are a number of these cases, and I think Greg Crittenden and the OIM, they've really identified about 50 or so cases that fall in this kind of gray area where AIU, the Administrative Investigative Unit Director, gets it and says, you know what, we don't have enough to open an investigation at this moment. We're going to send it to the facility so the facility sergeants, captains, or whatever can get to this inmate, determine what really is happening here, determine what's going on with this complaint, get the video or things like that, and then send it back to us to say, well, this does not seem to be a misconduct complaint. It was truly an issue around the service of the food. Or, no, this is a misconduct complaint. This deputy has done this. We did some fact finding. There's another inmate that saw this. In that case, it would be routed back to the AIU and opened as informal internal affairs investigation. That's ideally how it should work. It has not worked ideally. There have been several deficiencies in this process. and that have been pointed out by Greg Crittenden to our to one of my staff that work with me, Carl McCann-Crow. And we've been working with the DSD to try to make corrections in this regard, to try to institute processes. Up to even yesterday, we had a meeting with Sheriff and his executive staff and his teams working on this, and the monitor and me and my executive team working on this. We have created things like checklists. So like when you receive this at the facility, the supervisor now has a checklist, and it's an electronic form version that's being implemented, where they have to make sure that they've pulled the video, that they've retained the video, that they've interviewed the inmates involved, that they've done these steps to make sure that they are doing a thorough job for us to get this back. The question is also about, are they the best equipped to do this? Well, first of all, yeah, they are, because they have quick access to that inmate. They are there in the housing unit. They have 24/7 access to that inmate. And typically, because our population rotates out so much quickly, the quicker we can get to an inmate, the better. Secondly, they manage these processes and the food pass and all those things that are typically the subjects of these complaints. They have access to all that at their fingertips, and they have access to the facility video. Now, do they have the bandwidth? Well, we all know, and you're all familiar with the shortages in staffing for the Denver Sheriff Department. And I think that has exacerbated some of the deficiencies in what we found. So maybe bandwidth isn't there. So one of the solutions we discussed yesterday with the monitor and with the sheriff is having specifically assigned sergeants to these particular complaints that would be trained and would know the expectations of what they need to do and how they need to do it, so nothing is slipping through the cracks, and that we are providing the monitor with the information that is needed for him to make his recommendations, and or Ms. Castle, when she gets on, she can make her recommendations around how he believes or she believes the case should be handled. And so that process is now being in place. That is going to be in place. I appreciate Greg sending out an email this morning, kind of capturing our thoughts around that and really putting in, this is what's happening. There's also been a solution that we are going to be utilizing, a technology solution, but that is, I think, secondary. We need to fix the process, and the technology will just complement it, but the process is where it needs to be. I see Stephanie over here.
Yeah, thank you, Armando. Yeah, if I could sort of summarize my understanding of what you just said. What you're basically saying is, if it's a misconduct complaint, sometimes there are issues in determining whether it's a misconduct complaint versus a service complaint. If it's a service complaint, it is your view that DSD is better equipped to handle service complaints, such as complaints about the food, or a complaint about, for example, medical care that may involve Denver Health. But if it is a misconduct complaint that you do believe, in fact, that it should be investigated by AIU, that's what I heard you say. Am I wrong?
Yep, you're correct.
Okay. And you're saying also that the process has not worked well in order to create that sort of allocation of responsibilities, but you all, along with the monitor, are working to try to improve the process. So my question is, with that foundation in mind, that if the monitor's office believes after there's a misconduct complaint that it should be investigated as a misconduct complaint, will the Department of Public Safety follow the recommendation of the monitor, even if it might disagree, and in fact investigate the matter as a misconduct complaint as opposed to a service complaint if the monitor believes that it should be investigated by AIU?
Thank you, Stefan, for that question. Well, the answer is I can't make a blanket statement in regards to that case by case and not knowing the future of what these might be. I would hope that we're at a place, and the monitor knows me, and I hope to have the same relationship with Elizabeth, and I anticipate I will, that she will be able to pick up a phone, and if this is a disagreement that we are at, that we talk through that disagreement. I will tell you, we typically side on the fact of opening the case. That is something that we will do. But if there is a disagreement in that, I will obviously discuss case by case and what those disagreements are. But the way I look at things is I will always, more inclined to open the case as opposed to, unless we're really far apart on it, which I don't really see that we are in many cases. But I do value that recommendation, and I'm more inclined than not to open a case. On my screen, Stefan froze, so if you're saying something, Stefan, I'm not able to do it.
Good. Thank you for that. Also, ultimately, if DSD and the monitor disagree, then you'll, sorry, can you hear me now? Yep.
I can hear you now.
Okay. Okay. So ultimately, you'll make the ultimate decision if, in fact, there's a disagreement between the monitor and DSD, but you will strongly consider the monitor's view that an investigation should be open for purposes of transparency and the like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm always willing to discuss those decisions, even with the board, and with that of where we're at. If there are those decisions that are made where there is still disagreement. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, are we at the end of the questions? Oh, IA Pro.
IA Pro. So this is the last topic area. So I'll try to get through so we have time to cover it all. But please stop me if you have questions. So there was a discussion earlier in the year that I discussed about having another instance of IA Pro that we would purchase from CI Technologies. That's the vendor for IA Pro. To better manage his grievances and other incidents. So that is something that we've been working diligently on, and the need versus is there another way to do this? So one of the things I did in that regard is I sent two of our staff, our technical analysts for our staff, and another person, administrator in the Public Integrity Division to the IA Pro conference, because there were a couple of things I wanted to vary out. I've been to those conferences before in the past. They're very well done. And you, in fact, talk to the developers of the technology solutions from CA Technologies. You talk about what they're working on. But most importantly, you talk to other departments around the country around how they're employing IA Pro and how they're not employing IA Pro. So when we're talking about instances of IA Pro, basically it is, we're basically using an application, IA Pro, and we have an instance for the Denver Police Department. So they have their own. It's the same software, same capabilities, their version of IA Pro, which that's their clearinghouse, and that's how they manage their investigation. Then we have the Denver Sheriff Department's version, which resides over at the Public Integrity Division since we've assumed that function, that version. What we had discussed is, would it make sense to purchase another version for the Denver Sheriff Department to manage their grievances through? Right now, those grievances are managed at their facilities, the mostly paper process. We've also even discussed there are capabilities to do electronic grievances. Obviously, another application, another technology solutions that we would have to do vetting on. But all that is something that we've been working on. In working on and doing our due diligence around this, what we've determined would be the best outcome of this is actually utilizing within our PID version of IA Pro a functionality called Blue Team. Blue Team is basically a conduit. It's a module within IA Pro of the case management system in IA Pro that is it's a web-based module that is able to it serves as a conduit of information to the facility to IA Pro. The good thing about it is all the data and all the information that's within it stays within IA Pro. So eventually, like the process we talked about, what I talked about with Stefan, if the determination is made, it gets sent. I'll just start at the beginning. We get a grievance at AIU. AIU uploads it into IA Pro's Blue Team. They then forward that to the downtown detention center to a captain at downtown detention center. That person brings up the, let's say she brings up the video, she does an interview with the inmate, she puts it in, she makes a determination that there was alleged misconduct here. She sent it to AIU. AIU sees that. There's a mechanism. It really tracks that back and forth. And then the director of AIU gets it, says, okay, I am going to make it a case, presses the button, all that gets imported, it becomes a case. All that is subject to the review of the monitor. Same way, if we say, nope, this looks like a decline, then the monitor's office can see the information that was used to substantiate the decline. And then that is how it's happened. And then obviously, if he or she then has a disagreement with that, then we can start that conversation back and forth. So that's what we decided to do. That we believe will be more efficiently working on this, as opposed to working in another separate system. So that is something that we are employing as of now. My staff have been working on for the past month of getting it up and running, with the target of trying to get it up and running at the new year. The second part of this is a question about it, and another thing I had talked to you all early about, I think it was in one of my first meetings with you this year. And that was a new functionality that I had heard about from IAPRO called a public portal. I was excited about this because this has been a pain point for a lot of us in the city, and that is the central place for citizens, for family members of those in custody, and for those in custody to go to online and make a complaint in a format and that all of us could be using the same one. And I mean, all of us, it could be a link on the Citizen Oversight Board page. It could be one on our page. There could be one on the 311 page. There could be one on the Office of Independent Monitor page, where a citizen can easily pop up a form, make their complaint. The other good thing about this module is that it is also it serves as a mechanism for updating folks on the complaint. We can customize it. So once you send it, you get a text or an email back that says, based off your phone number or your email you provide, okay, this is your complaint number. It has been forwarded to the Administrative Investigation Unit. Let's say it is then made a formal case. We could then communicate back, the status, when it is resolved, and all those things can then be communicated back. I think that's how people negotiate these types of services more these days, is through their phones and our busy lifestyles. And this really offered promise to me. When I first talked to you about it, it had not been deployed anywhere around the country. And we were talking about being early adopters to it. Early adoption, and I'm sure Julie could tell us all about that, early adoption with technologies has its own problems and can be its own problems. But I mean, it also provided us maybe a lower price point, but I didn't want to take that risk. I didn't want to start off with something that I'm talking about is new, that's great. And then let's say it fails, there's tech failures, there's things, then it doesn't have that desired effect that we want. We want something that's going to be not only usable, but that is friendly and the users are utilizing it well. So when I had our folks go to the conference, I had them research this, see who's been using it. And so we have been satisfied with those responses. We have received a quote. The other part of that was, I was wondering, do I need to buy multiple versions for police and for sheriff? Because I don't want that. I want a singular place, whether you're complaining about the sheriff's department or the police department. I want a singular place where it goes to, that a citizen doesn't have to, or one of our community members doesn't have to, like, figure out, well, do I put this to sheriff or police? We did get the answer to that, as I think earlier this week, that we can buy one version that can serve both our departments and all our departments. So with that, we are proceeding with that. That also goes through a technology services intake process. I've briefed my technology director on it. Since it's just another module within IAPRO, it should not be as lengthy of an intake process and going into. It's pretty much just flipping the switch within the software connections we have now. So that is in place. That is a cost that I'm prioritizing and budgeting for. And I think it's going to be well-used money and well-placed investment to have a better experience. And then it also helps all our staffs, from Greg's staff to my staff, on that administrative burden of getting an email, pulling it up, scanning a hard copy of a grievance. Some of that will be reduced where we're doing this. The other great thing about it, just like in Blue Team, all the information resides within IAPRO. So there isn't a duplication of those things. They're imported right into fields. So when you're making cases, you're not going to have data errors or anything like that. So really excited. Oh, the other thing that I needed to make sure that this could do, we are, I don't know if we're unique, but we do accept complaints that are anonymous. Not a lot of agencies do, or a lot of make that, but we do. And I needed to make sure that if someone wished to remain anonymous, that they could still do that. That if they choose not to be, they just want to make an anonymous complaint, they could, and they are able to accommodate that request. So that is something that was important. I think I got all those questions. So hopefully, again, I'd love to start this at the new year. My team's working hard on the back end process to get it up and running. When that comes out, that'll be something I will work with the board on, with the monitor on, and all of us on how do we want to put this out? How do we want to communicate that out to our community so they know of this and really get an education around it? Because we have this fancy thing that no one knows about or that don't know how to use. I really want to make sure we work all together and get it. And I will keep you all apprised on that part. Lastly, Julie, I just want to touch on this because it's really good and goes to one of the questions you posed earlier, and that is there a policy currently in place for when footage related to critical incidents should be uploaded in IA Pro? The LoDo shooting really highlighted something for me that I did not know existed. I did not know because in the Sheriff's Department where I was at, any critical incident stuff, that video was immediately uploaded in IA Pro. For officer involved shooting protocols and things, I realized that the police department handled it a little bit differently. I also don't think that meets with the spirit of transparency, nor does it meet the needs of the monitor. I think that that's something that we need to make immediately available. While Greg and his staff were able to see the video of the LoDo shooting, they didn't have it in IA Pro to manipulate, do all the, I mean, just to like look, go frame by frame, do their own analysis of it initially right off. That didn't sit well with me, and I thank you, Julia, particularly, and Greg for bringing that up to me. It was not something I knew what had happened. I've worked with Chief Thomas on this. He is receptive to making it immediately available, whether in IA Pro or evidence.com, which is the storage solution for body-worn camera and those things. So that is something that we are rolling out. The draft policy on that was in final stages in legal review right now with our team, but we are on all in agreement that this should be a process. It should be immediately made available to the monitor upon the incident. And so that is going to be out also with some more protocols and parameters for the press around our parameters in releasing videos out to the press. So I hope to have that. We want to get it out before the Christmas holiday. Make sure that we can get that installed immediately.
Okay, thank you for all of that. Additional questions from board members on any of these topics? Okay, that seems like not at this time. We'll follow up with you with any additional questions. Really appreciate your going through all of those outstanding questions. Thanks for spending time with us today, and we'll transition to our discussion topic with the nominating committee and let you go.
Thank you all. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Have a happy holiday.
Great, you too. Okay, welcome nominating committee members to the COB. I know, or I think you had requested, it seems like a long time ago, so please refresh my memory if I'm not correct, but just wanted to have a conversation here about the nominating process and open dialogue on potential changes that we may make to that. Does that sound about right? Okay.
Yeah, I think a piece of understanding to the process is a little bit more that you're proposing around changing.
Okay, great. So is there anything that you would like to start with?
I think so. Go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us. No, we don't have a particular agenda. I think that is a major piece of this is understanding what you all would like to replace the nominating committee process with. We do also want to express a little bit of surprise / disappointment that we weren't looped in earlier as to these significant potential changes. But there's no need to discuss any of that. You know, we're here to just move forward, and that's fine. But yeah, just understand what all you are proposing the process looks like moving forward, and to make sure that any shortcomings you all and or we perceived with not just selection, but really recruitment are addressed moving forward, regardless of what that process is. So I think we'll leave it at that and listen for a minute.
Sure, I can start, and then other board members who want to chime in are welcome to do that. So I'll just start with what's the problem we're trying to solve here. And at the root, what we see in terms of the process for filling board vacancies for COB members is that, at least for a majority of the members on the board today, the process took somewhere between 8 months to 2 years. And for many board members who were on the longer end of that spectrum, the process was very confusing, not particularly transparent, and sort of difficult to understand if they were still in the process, you know, how that was going, and who to even follow up with if they have questions about, you know, where they are. I know, you know, in my own context, you know, my process was probably 5 or 6 months long, and I actually had no idea that I was still in the process. I'd gone through sort of rigorous interviews, and then it was sort of like nothing happened, and then a certificate showed up in my mailbox that told me I had gotten on the board. You know, I initially went through my city council member because I know that person, he's my neighbor, and then was eventually appointed by the mayor. And so, you know, that was fairly random to me as well, because that wasn't, you know, where I had started in terms of like alerting people to my interest in the board. So, you know, I think in general, our board has each experienced a different sort of process flow for getting on the board, and felt that that was, you know, very elaborate and long compared to sort of, you know, our experience with other boards. What I'll say too is that, you know, this is not our desire to make changes to that is not a particular critique of nominating committee members or your effort or anything, you know, related to your commitment to helping the city. It has felt more like, you know, a process was created in order to create, you know, make it a fair and sort of apolitical process, but that that's not actually how it's played out. And it doesn't seem to be manifesting itself in that way. And so, you know, our perception is this thing was created, and we've, you know, met with community members who were part of that design. You know, this thing was created in alignment with the judicial nominating process, right? So think judges and, you know, the state Supreme Court and things like this, that is much more complicated than other boards for the city, and much more elaborate, and, you know, with sort of limited effect in the end. You know, I think all of the board members, or many board members, are aware of people who've applied for the board, got through, you know, the nominating committee, but then got stuck in the politics of city council anyway. And so, you know, from our perspective, it's a desire to reduce the number of steps in the process, reduce the number of stakeholders responsible for the process, and improve clarity, or at least the point of contact for people who may be in the process. So, you know, at the root, it's not, you know, because this committee has done any disservice to the board. It's really just, holy cow, this is a very elaborate process, and we need board members to be able to get on the board as fast as possible. So that's sort of at the root. What I'll also say is that, you know, we began working through this process probably, you know, just a few weeks before we got in touch with you. So it may feel like you were looped in late, but, you know, it was basically as soon as we actually had, you know, the concept and traction. You know, I personally had to do some work connecting with community members who were involved in the process and make sure that we had you know, community support before I suggested any changes to you all or to, you know, a potential council member for carrying this change to council. So if that feels like it wasn't sufficient and it was short, I apologize for that. That was not the intention. Stefan, I see your hand is up.
Nope.
Now he's disappeared. So
yeah.
oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Stefan.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I just want to echo one thing that Julia said. You know, our desire to look into the criticism of the nominating committee. You know, the process may very well have bogged down at different levels, you know, whether that's at the mayoral level, the city council level, or just a general oversight administrative level. I mean, I want to echo what Julia said and say we very much appreciate, you know, what you folks are doing, or, so, you know, similar. You're volunteering your services to the community to appoint positions to a very, very important board in our view. So it's just our desire, I think, to streamline this process and get people on board much more quickly than we've been able to do. I mean, here, we're not even at full strength now. You know, we're at 7 out of 9, and that's really hampered our efforts to move forward. But this is not in no way a criticism, you know, of the nominating committee or the underlying purpose for which a nominating committee was appointed.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
So in terms of the proposed approach, you know, our desire is to really look a little bit more like other boards in the city in terms of the nominating process. So, you know, a vacancy is created. Daniel would work with both, you know, the council liaisons and the mayor's office liaisons for boards and commissions, alerting them to, you know, the gap. Typically, you know, we try and fill you know, geographically and skills and things like that. So it would be, you know, a similar to process to what other boards see, right? It's like we have a vacancy in CD7, you know, so let's get in touch with Councilmember Clark. Councilmember Clark does his work, or the future council member for that district, since he's not running again, does work to identify a candidate in the district, and then works through the, you know, appointment process through council. So, you know, there's not an elaborate redesign here. It's really just lopping off the beginning of the process. You all have a lot of institutional knowledge, records, and documents about, you know, who has applied in the past and the pipeline and the fit and all of that. And so, you know, as part of any potential change, we would need to do knowledge transfer and, you know, make sure that, you know, if you've got a queue of good candidates, that we can continue to make sure those folks, you know, are in the recruitment process. You know, the hope here is that we really push some accountability to the stakeholders who represent different geographies to make sure that their geography is represented on the board. So, you know, not much more to say about that other than, you know, we want them to do the hustle instead of you.
Have you talked to the council about doing that hustle? Only because we've reached out individually in every recruitment period to city council, particularly the people that don't have any representation, to let them know that their district isn't represented on the COB. And so I wonder, you know, how much more hustle they're willing to do.
Yeah, I think that's entirely possible that they have limited energy for that. You know, it's how it works for other boards and commissions. It's hard to get people to volunteer their time. Our board is a particular challenge because of just the level of effort that's required and, you know, time during a typical workday, et cetera. So, you know, the recruitment for this board is challenging anyway. And we have a very complex process to do that. So those two things are, you know, at the root of some of this.
Did you have a follow-up on that thread? It looks like you're thinking.
No, I'm just
Go ahead.
thinking, you know, there's a larger question, and agree with sort of some of what you said about the length of the process. And with Stefan, you know, it's definitely bogged down at different places. I think what I want to say is, unless you have, I don't think you're going to see a lot of difference in terms of recruitment effectiveness unless you have some new and different strategies, because some of what you've talked about are many of the things that we have tried repeatedly.
No
I think
doubt.
that's what I want to say.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, I want to start on that thread, which is just, and this is the main thing, I think, maybe not the main thing, but what one important thing we wanted to communicate to you all is the recruitment challenge. And Julia, you just acknowledged that. And as we've been having these conversations, and Julia, thanks for what you said. And you communicated when you did meet with the three of us, feels like a couple months ago now, you did communicate that clearly. And I don't think any of us is taking this personally in any way. And we want what's best for the process. We want what's best for the COB and the city. And yeah, we understand some of what you're saying for sure. I mean, Dee Dee was the one who personally reached out to city council members often. So I think she feels that closest. And just reflecting, Julia, I think you were, if not one of our first appointees, our first appointee. And we had so many applications that we were reviewing. And I don't know if they had just piled up over time or what, but when we first started, that we had, I feel like we did like multiple rounds of review. And then recruitment has now become such a challenge that in our past couple, we've had to like go to past candidates and say, hey, can we just, you don't need to resubmit materials. Can we just consider you again? Because we are struggling to even come up with a slate of 3. And we've been pleased, with what we've come, I mean, with the recent appointments and how they've turned out. But the recruitment has really, really been a slog. And I know you've been trying, Julia, I think you were on the news at one point making a push. Daniel's been a huge resource. I think some of that reflection, obviously the pandemic had a huge effect on people and their priorities and their commitments. And so anyway, I don't know what else to contribute to that conversation, other than, and even the three of us, Tamisha, who joined us more recently, contributed some fresh ideas along the recruitment front. Daniel, like I said, put in a lot of hours. So I don't know what that looks like moving forward, but it's going to continue to be a challenge. And I hope you all are better if this does move forward, that you're better equipped to address that.
Yeah, it's worth noting that, eliminating the nominating committee is one of a few changes that we are making in order to hopefully improve the recruitment process. So we have a nominating committee, and you all have to produce a number of candidates before we can move forward. And so even just eliminating the need for a slate, right? It's like, Julia's a good candidate, let's just move her forward. But instead, our process requires that you move Julia, Daniel, and Karen forward in order to be able to recruit. And so part of the change, so nominating committees one, the slate would be another. We're looking at increasing the compensation of board members because, on our committee are mostly executives who have flexibility over our time and our jobs. And so, I can take 2 hours off on a Friday and, I don't risk, getting fired for that. And so, having a little bit more skin in the game, financial skin in the game, we hope we can recruit, with greater economic diversity, with more age diversity. And so there are some other changes too that we are looking at. And this is just sort of one part. I think most city boards have a hard time recruiting. It's hard to know sort of what you'll do and what will be required and what is it. And, so, there's a lot wrapped up into that, just general engagement with government, right? We could like go real deep on, democracy if you wanted, right? It's like, we could travel down this thread for quite some time, but yeah, so we are looking at a suite of changes in order to sort of expedite the process and improve, the diversity of our recruitment and the approach to our recruitment. So this is just one part.
Do you anticipate that there'll still be a rotation among sort of council and mayor appointees on some level?
Yeah. I think it's like a back and forth, basically.
Yeah. I'll just highlight that because I'm waiting to hear about another commission that they've been redoing the process on the mayor's side, and it's been very bogged down.
No doubt. And, it's sort of like
On that
weird at this
side.
particular time, right? We'll get a new mayor, that new mayor may have a totally different. And so, for me, it's sort of less myopic to the individual and more about like, what can we control? What can we reduce in terms of complexity? And, then the politics are going to be the politics regardless. And certainly there'll be change with any new mayor.
That was my next question was, is there a solution for the politics problem, or is it that the nominating committee didn't solve for the politics problem? So that problem's going to be there regardless of if we have a nominating committee or not. Is it the
I think
latter?
my perception is the politics, if you can solve the politics problem, you've really done it, right?
Yeah.
So
No,
that will continue, no doubt.
That's fair. That's fair. At this point, I'm just speaking for myself, but I certainly understand the desire to expedite things by cutting, and from our perspective, there was always a little bit of awkwardness in them trying to field questions about the COB and not being on the COB. And two, after we come up with our slate, then there's a bit of a black hole for us that it seems like all of you as candidates experienced as well. And that's all, we would just have to communicate that. So like, hey, we're sending these 3 names to council, and then, good luck. You'll hear from someone and, something. So again, having the addition of Daniel has certainly helped with a lot of that, but it's still a lot of additional steps. And then, again, if this does go through and we're talking about transfer of knowledge, we certainly do have candidates in the queue. One name is jumping out. Didi will know exactly who I'm talking about. If he doesn't get appointed this time by the mayor, we do have a slate of 3 up to the mayor right now. He's been on there a fifth time. So let's get the poor guy on the COB. So anyway, I don't know if that was beyond the bounds today, but I'll stop.
That
And,
sort of highlights the issue, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a real drawback in having 3 really strong candidates, because you can have 3 really strong candidates, only one gets selected every time. And I think with this particular person, they've always been a strong candidate, and for various reasons, they haven't been selected, but they would absolutely be an asset, I think, on the COB, or I certainly feel that way.
Yeah, and here we are, 2 people down, and we've been 3 or 4 people down at certain points. So that, sort of undermines, exactly what we're trying to do. But I know we're all on this. We all have similar views here. I want to say too, Arash, I mean, when I went through this too, I mean, it was very clear you would explain it, or committee members would explain to me, okay, we're now done with this part of the process, and this is what's going to happen next. And pretty much what was going to happen next was out of your hands.
Yeah, and Stefan, yours did really, from what I recall, really get bogged down in the politics. So to the extent yours took several months after that, then I do have some.
Yeah. I don't know. I wasn't privy to that, but it did take a while, and I was similar to Julia. And in that, out of the blue, I got a certificate in the mail, and that's how I learned how I was appointed. It's bizarre.
Well, that's not okay one way or the other.
It was great, actually. It was like a funny surprise, right? You're like, oh, okay, I guess, like, when do I show up?
Yeah, right.
We didn't have an administrator at the time too, so I was like, who do I get in touch with to like be on the board?
Yeah.
So very strange.
Are
So what else would you like to cover with us today?
I have one more question. Are you all thinking of, and I apologize if I missed this, but are you all thinking of having like a subcommittee that would be helping with recruitment and nomination?
We don't have any subcommittees.
Okay, so just be everyone?
That would be unusual for us. Mostly it's like, who has the energy to do the thing at this moment, which is why we would like 2 more members. Because, part of our work is, incident-based, driven by, what's happening in public safety at any time. With the publication of our strategic plan, I think we will have, some more structure to our work and strategic direction. So I think that will help us, but, we haven't gotten to the idea of a subcommittee for recruitment.
I think those were the main things. Tamisha, I know you're new. I didn't know if you wanted to weigh in. I think my other question is also, so where are you at with this? Where are you at with this with Robin? Honestly, Julia, when you presented to us, it sounded like a done deal. When we communicated with Robin, it seemed more up in the air. And so I'm curious where you're at right now.
We are waiting to have this conversation and then we will follow back up with her. When we met with you before, we were in the process of drafting specific language. That language is drafted, but we haven't met with her to review that or confirmed that we have alignment on that. So it's really just sort of this looping process, right? It's like, we need to move the thing forward with the concrete idea. We need to get words written down and then, have various stakeholder conversations. When I met with you, I had gotten confirmation from community partners that they were supportive of this change. And so for me, that was sort of the most important step, was to make sure that we weren't getting crosswise with our partner orgs.
Okay. Yeah, Tamisha, I don't know if Tamisha's able to, if she has anything to add, but I'd certainly want to hear from her before we.
Listening to everything that's going on, so we're just still processing at the moment.
Okay, well, I'm good then. Didi, are you good?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yeah, we do appreciate you all having this conversation with us, and we don't want to hold up the process. So I think we just need, the three of us need to get back together ASAP and just give you our input. We appreciate being included and having that input considered by
Sounds
all
good.
of you.
Yep. And yeah, let me know when you're ready for that.
All right. Tamisha and Arash, I'll follow up with you as soon as we get off.
Sounds good. All
That's
right.
good.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for
Appreciate
everything
your
you
time.
do.
Likewise.
All right.
Thank
Happy
you.
holidays. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Okay, interim monitor, Crittenden, do you have anything that you'd like to cover with the board in this public forum?
No, because it involves proposed and pending things that are in the future. Nothing solidified yet. And so I do have some topics to talk about in executive session.
All right, if that's the case, may I have a motion to adjourn to executive session in order to discuss ongoing and open investigations?
I'll move to adjourn to executive session.
Thank you. I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. We will see you over there.